Welcome to Rise to Liberty. If you're tuning in, this is going to be the second time today, but that's what we like doing here. So I am very honored to welcome my guest today. He is a man with an incredible resume. He is the former Libertarian Party of Utah chair and secretary. He's also the current Libertarian candidate for the Secretary of Utah, the only candidate in history to run as a Libertarian 3 years in a row. He's a tenured college professor from Utah Valley University. He's been elected to numerous national Libertarian Party positions. He's been a guest on over 900 radio stations, a devout husband and father. He's a man that I have grown to deeply respect and enjoy my time that I spend with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Joseph Buchman. How you doing tonight?
Well, I'm doing much better after that introduction. Wow, that's very kind. I am, however, running for the Utah State Treasurer.
Treasurer, not the secretary. That's right.
All good. And,
I knew I was going to screw it up somewhere.
It's okay. This is a special election again. Normally, the treasurer would not be up for another 2 years, but the treasurer resigned. The government made an appointment. Next election cycle, then they go ahead and run an election. So we're kind of in an off-term early election for treasurer. Normally, it'd be a 4-year term. So I went down and paid the filing fee, and then discovered within a few hours that I had paid twice what the fee should be, because it's based on the amount of salary that one earns over their time in office, according to the laws of Utah. So I believe out of all the candidates running for state treasurer, I'm the only one who noticed he was overcharged by the state of Utah. So I may have some fun with that. I have yet to go down there and pick up my refund. But I will, and I'll have some fun with that. And yeah, I only ran as a Libertarian 3 years in a row because of another special election, and that was when Jason Chaffetz resigned, and we had to have a special off-year election to elect a member of the United States House. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to run as a Libertarian year after year after year because of the 2-year election cycles. But I did State House or State Senate, United States House, and State Senate 3 years in a row. And I bought stickers to put over the yard signs just to change the office I was running for while keeping the same yard sign. But yeah, I do love liberty. I love what the Libertarian Party stands for on its founding principles. I don't love all libertarians, but none of us do. I don't think there's anybody who loves all libertarians out there. But thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, it's honestly a great pleasure. So one thing I like finding out about my guests is what actually brought you into libertarianism and what sold you on the ideas as soon as you said, yep, I'm a libertarian.
Yeah, it was one of those instantaneous conversions, which you hear about a lot. It just becomes self-evidently obvious that this is the way I want to live my life. I don't want to initiate violence against anybody, not ever. I certainly retain the right to use violence in response to someone attacking me, but I'm not even sure that's always the best path. Certainly Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and others taught us the power of simple, nonviolent confrontation with those who are hateful and hurtful. And then the idea of the right of self-ownership, that this meat bucket that I'm having a human experience on Earth in, this space suit for those who choose to live on Earth for a few decades, is mine. This doesn't belong to someone else. Nobody gets to tell me what I can do with my physical body, what I can read, what I can eat, what I can drink, who I can have romantic relationships with. None of anybody's business, not the government's, not my neighbors, nobody's. This is me. This is mine. That was a revelation to me, the right of self-ownership, and then the non-initiation of aggression. And those are hierarchical, so that, absolutely no violence or force used against others. And then whatever peaceful thing you choose to do with your own physical body, you can't choose to do things that are hurtful to others. And I mean, physically hurtful. But I would include with that drunk driving, putting others at imminent needless risk, or even sleep deprived driving. I try not to do that because That's part of that non-initiation of aggression principle that I want to take seriously. And I can remember like yesterday, it was, I could probably find the exact date, but I know it was in August of 1977. I know it was on the campus of the University of Tennessee. I was 19 years old, and I was having a conversation with a friend at that conference about Robert Heinlein and the book "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress." And this is Heinlein's science fiction retelling of the American Revolution. But now the revolution is by the liberty-seeking people who are out on the moon, who are rebelling against the tyrannical government that's based on the earth. And they fight back to regain their liberties. And one of the rallying cries in that novel is the phrase "Tanstoffel." I'm sure all of your listeners, surely if they're tuning in, know what Tanstoffel means, but just in case, it's the initialism for "there ain't no such thing as a free lunch." A lot of people seem to think there's a free lunch out there, that our representatives on Capitol Hill are just sitting on a hill that's made of gold. And if we could just get them to give it out more fairly, we'd all be a lot better off. No, in any giving from government, there's a prior taking, and then an incredible amount of inefficiency, and then maybe a trickle of giving comes out the other end. So there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So I'm having this conversation about that, August 1977, and my friend says, there's a political party that has Tanstoffel as their flag. I said, well, that's it. I'm a member. Boom, I'm done. So I joined shortly thereafter. I know I was getting fundraising calls by 1978, 79 from Alex and Alexis, which I thought was interesting that one was a guy and one was a woman. And I don't know if those were made up names for the purposes of fundraising or not, but I was putting money on a credit card, money I didn't have, while I was an undergraduate student at Indiana University. And and so I'm pretty sure I was a member of the party in 78, 79, 80. The earliest records that Robert Krause, our operations manager in DC, who kind of keeps the whole party together. If you don't know Robert Krause, you should get to know Robert Krause. This guy has been the longest tenured staff member there. So they can find me back to 1984 as having a membership card, but I'm clear it was at least 5 years before that. And I don't know what your experience is in talking to other libertarians, whether people come to it kind of slowly or a period of time, or if it isn't more like a light bulb goes off and you go, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't think we should be enslaving other people. I mean, 100% taxation is by definition slavery, the taking of all of the productive effort of another human being without their consent. The taking of that at 100% is the very definition of slavery. And then you got to ask yourself, well, what percentage am I okay with? Right now, from what I read, the people who are actually engaged in productive activity in the United States are taxed at about 50%. And then there's other people who aren't engaged in any productive activity. And God bless them. They're children, they're the infirm and the elderly. There are people who've suffered horrible debilitating accidents or who were born with birth defects. Yeah, we should take care of all of those people. But there are folks who are taxed at zero pretty much right now. And so I just when I realized that taxation is theft, that 100% taxation is the very definition of slavery, I became very comfortable and adamant about the only fair tax rate is 0%. Libertarians have to then defend themselves against the argument that, well, we can't trust people to do the right thing if we have no taxation. We have to force people somehow to pay for national defense or things that are in their own interest. And I find that very undemocratic. Democracy is not just about voting. Democracy
very cynical as well.
It's very cynical, and it's a fantasy. People aren't good enough, but we can somehow get a group of people that are better than that, who can then use force to know. that's given us 30 trillion in debt, a global footprint all over the world, wars without end. Just no, stop the crazy. And perhaps if human beings aren't capable of developing a little bit of wisdom, we probably need to learn from the consequences of those poor choices. The other stuff is just delaying the inevitability of learning from the consequences of those choices. So I'm pretty sure, and I don't remember with absolute clarity what all I was doing in 1977 or 78 or 79 or whatever. And I was Joe Eagle Scout, by the way. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't in fraternities. I was interested in learning a lot. And I was working in radio, 1978, 79, 80. WB, Bloomington, 97 WB. And WTTS, the AM station there. And just busy working and studying and volunteering for a bunch of stuff. But I have never wavered from that commitment to non-initiation of aggression, right of self-ownership, property, responsibility, and the other things that fall out of that logically and naturally ever. I have wavered in my commitment to the Libertarian Party as an organization. I volunteered for the Andre Maru campaign in 1991 and 92. And you know, this is now ancient history, but the Libertarian National Committee in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the middle of that campaign, held an emergency meeting of the LNC to consider removing Andre Maru as the presidential candidate. And you know, they held a hearing, kind of a trial, and eventually decided, I think almost unanimously, if not unanimously, not to do that. But there were people arguing crazy things like, look at all the earned media we could get if we chuck our presidential nominee and replace him with someone else. And the charges were, in my view, absurd, and the result of kind of a personal vendetta. So after the 92 campaign, I was pretty burned out. I'd also met my wife, and we were in the process of being engaged and getting married. And I actually moved to Salt Lake City, got married on July 27th, 1993. And the Libertarian National Convention was right here in Salt Lake. And I didn't go. I don't even remember knowing about it. I was that disconnected. Of course, I had become a new husband and a dad to two little girls that I inherited as wedding presents. Their first dad had died when my wife was still pregnant with their second child, her first husband's second child. So I became an instant dad, started a new job at that college. But I don't remember in 93 even being aware that the Libertarian Convention was in town. Isn't that wild? Got active again in the party when I got a call from my dear friend, Bill Redpath. Bill was chair of the LNC several terms, and he's the ballot access dynamo that has gotten the party a lot of progress in getting on the ballot in a lot of states. Him and Richard Winger, two heroes, absolute heroes. Bill called me up and asked if I could help with a petition drive to get Utah back on the ballot. We had lost our ballot access in the 90s. And so I said, yeah, I'd be happy to help out with that. And then next thing I knew, the state chair of the party at that time, Rob Latham, asked me if I would run for the United States House. That was the first time in 2008. And then I did it again in 2017. So I've been pretty active since I got out on the streets and started getting people to sign signatures to get the Utah party back on the ballot. I think that was in 95 or 6, somewhere in there.
And that's honestly so interesting. I love hearing the history of the party. I personally got interested in the philosophy mainly because my main driving factor is truth, objective truth. And of course, I was drawn to the fact that you shouldn't own people. Consent is king or queen, you know, depending on how you look at it. And the idea of consent, it was pretty instilled in me. It was just interesting. It was kind of just a natural evolution. My personal opinion is that libertarianism, at least how the basic of the philosophy is the natural order of things, and people just need to be reminded of that. They need to break that government sanctioned programming that has been pumped into their skulls all the way from preschool all the way through 12th grade. And it just makes so much sense, and it's easy and it's free to not cause harm to people. So
I don't know if you've already shared this in earlier episodes of your show, but if you haven't, or even if you have and want to do it quickly, what brought you into libertarianism? Was there a light bulb moment similar to mine?
So the first time I had ever heard libertarian was Ron Paul. That was my generation, my era. It was his first. Well, not the first because of '88 running as a libertarian, but his second most recent run for president in 2008. I had actually seen a half-page advertisement in High Times magazine. I think I was in high school. I wasn't able to vote in 2008, but I was in 2012. And at that point, I thought it was political suicide to support and advocate for the decriminalization and legalization of marijuana. And I was blown away. It was a little bit more important to me then than it is now. Although I still stand by, those beliefs that it should be both decriminalized and legalized. But then I started just diving into the philosophy. I had always been a reader. Question everything was pretty much how I was raised. Especially if you think that you're right, you should definitely question yourself, because then you get stuck in one of the two parties. So it was pretty much just a natural evolution from how I was raised, what my anti-authority attitude of being a young punk. So that's really what brought me in, and I just kept learning and kept chasing truth, which is actually why I started the show, was to chase truth, and not only bring people along my journey, but also discuss other people's journey as well. So that's cool. really what brought me in, and last 2 years is what made me get involved with the party instead of being a small L. So gotta put my money where my mouth is at this point, So
I graduated from I was an undergraduate at Indiana University, and then the summer of 1979, I got a job working at a TV station behind the scenes doing videotape operations. And a videotape machine, broadcast quality, back in 1979 was the size of maybe 2 full-size refrigerators, right? And the tape was 2 inches wide and on giant reels, and really we were making video work with cutting edge technology that today looks like a Rube Goldberg crazy bizarre way of doing things. It was all analog. It had 4 heads on a spinning cam that went something like 60,000 revolutions a second, and the tape went by there, and you had to have a vacuum to keep it from just destroying the tape, and the special oils and all sorts of analog electronics to try to get the signal to sort of look okay. And I loved it. I was like, hey, I'm on the bridge of the enterprise. Well, the quality of the video out of your cell phone today is, I don't know, 50, 100 times greater than what took a machine the size of 2 refrigerators. And this thing can store the video, and it's got the camera built in and the lighting built in and the sound. But now this is nuts. So it was all, and those were $500,000 machines. They cost $500,000 each. But one night, I think in the summer of '79, we ran the Ed Clark for President videos. So these were up against the Johnny Carson Tonight Show. So not a lot of people watching. But the Libertarian Party nationally, through the Koch brothers and Ed Clark's fundraising, was able to buy time to run these 15-minute, I think they were 15-minute ads called Alternative 80 about how the Libertarian Party was now a legitimate thing. And so I first voted Libertarian for Ed Clark in 1980. My first vote was 76, but I wasn't aware of Roger McBride at all. I'm not even sure he was on the ballot in Indiana. I voted for Gerald Ford because I thought the non-elected guy would make the best president. I'd forgotten that. So I guess I was a little pre-libertarian. This was before the 77 conference. But yeah, I remember in 76 thinking, Gerald Ford is obviously not a politician. I mean, he kept stumbling and falling over, and they made fun of him on Saturday Night Live. But I definitely wanted a guy who was somebody who hadn't been driven to ever run for president. I thought that was the best qualification of all. But 80, I voted for Ed Clark. And then I don't remember every election through the 80s. I know I still think Andre Maru was the most articulate of all of our presidential candidates. His appearance on Larry King Live, which you can find on a couple of YouTube videos, Larry threw every hard question at him, and Andre just handled them beautifully. He had no Aleppo moments. He had been an elected representative in the State House of Alaska. I think he was one of the co-authors of the bill that eliminated the income tax in Alaska. And so Andre had the political experience, and he was very articulate. And so once your listeners are done tuning into this show, go Google Andre Maru and Larry King. I think every candidate running as Libertarian ought to watch those videos. It's a great way to learn how to masterfully handle difficult debate questions.
So one thing I wanted to get into just a little bit was the work that you do with the National Party and the historical side of things, but one person in specific, and that's Karl Bray. Would you mind introducing Karl Bray to my audience?
Karl was a founding member of the Libertarian National Committee. He was in communication with David Nolan in the fall of 1971 and helped create that first convention in 72 in Denver. Karl had, prior to that, been a tax protester in the 1960s. And he was noted for, among other things, dressing up as Paul Revere, getting on a horse, riding the horse through Liberty Park here in Salt Lake City. There's Liberty Park. And he would give out these Karl Bray dollars, which he said would be more valuable than your Federal Reserve notes, which ultimately would be worthless. He published a book called Taxation and Tyranny, more of a booklet. And he sold several thousand copies. And the IRS was not pleased. The Internal Revenue Service was less artful, to be kind, in those days. And imagine this happening today. I would hope there would be a revolt. But what happened to Karl in 1971, 72 was the IRS went to his bank and seized his bank records. And there was a federal law passed in the 60s that required banks to make photocopies of all the checks that went through their bank. And the IRS got the names and addresses of everyone who had purchased a book. The federal government went after people who had bought a book. Now, if this isn't a violation of the First Amendment, a gross, obvious miscarriage of justice, I don't know what is. Because then they started calling up the purchasers of Karl's book and threatening them. If you act on the advice in this book, we will audit you. So, I mean, how do you respond to that? Well, Karl responded by suing them and upping the ante. And he had a precious metals company called the Rocky Mountain Mint and Depository. and he was selling gold and silver products. Well, on August 15th, 1971, this was a Sunday night, the ghostly image of Richard Milhouse Nixon appeared on televisions around the country, most of them still black and white. And this evil bastard took the U.S. off the gold standard and imposed by executive edict wage and price controls on the United States economy. Whatever you were being paid, that's what you're going to be paid. Whatever the price of a can of soup was in your store, that's what it's frozen at. Now, I remember this because my dad was a physician, and he had his office in our house. He was never a physician out to make a lot of money. He was a physician out to help a lot of people. And he did a lot of pro bono or charitable work. He delivered a lot of babies he never got paid for. My dad was a brilliant man, a kind man. He took his career as a Christian calling to do good in the world, as did my mom, who was a surgical nurse. And I can remember my dad being outraged that his prices were now frozen, and they were the lowest rates in town. And he was very angry. So I remember August 15th, 1971. Well, Karl saw that here in Salt Lake. And over in Denver, David Nolan and Susan Nolan, Hugh Futch, two other people, I'm not going to remember their names correctly, so I won't try, were gathered in David's apartment on Lowell Avenue in Westminster, Colorado. And they said, that's it. We're done being Republicans. We're not. How can we be Republicans? We still had the draft. So these were people in their 20s. The Kent State shootings had occurred just a year earlier in Ohio, where the National Guard killed college students who were protesting the war in Vietnam. And now we've gone down the same economic path as the Soviet Union. No, we're done being Republicans. And over here in Salt Lake, Karl Bray, God bless him, he responded to the wage and price controls with a full-page ad in both the Deseret News and the Salt Lake Tribune, announcing that the Rocky Mountain Mint and Depository was raising the prices of its products by more than the federal limit in open defiance of the wage and price controls, and the federal government could choose to act accordingly. It's one hell of an ad. Full page. And he was right. I think his arguments about why the income tax should be seen as unconstitutional are spot on. Yet, the federal government is massive and with infinite resources, and they wound up putting him in Terminal Island prison after he was convicted of these crimes of failure to file income taxes and open opposition to wage and price controls. So I don't know. Over the course of my life, and I'm getting to the part of my life where I'm looking back on it more than looking forward. Oh, very nicely done. I think the photo earlier you maybe found on findagrave.com.
Sure did.
Of Karl. Yeah, pull that up again and then go to the other photos where that says there's 4 of them. Let's look at those photos too. But that's his booklet, which if you noticed at the bottom, it was for sale for the price of one phony Federal Reserve dollar.
Oh, that's awesome.
But if you can get back to Find a Grave, I want you to pull up one photo there that I'd like to have you share with your audience. But anyway, so Karl was of all the libertarians of that era, the least afraid of the federal government. He just kept poking it with a stick, and got a lot of supporters, raised a fair amount of money to cover his legal bills, and then eventually his medical issues as well. He died at a way too young age, 34, passed away of insidious cancer in 1978. Some people think that the federal government somehow gave him that cancer while they held him in a cage. I don't know. I've talked to one of his attorneys from that time who believes that to be true, because not only did Karl get this exceedingly rare cancer, but so did another tax protester who was held in the same prison at the same time. They both get. Yeah, so if you look at Find a Grave, there's photos and it's a little green circle with the number 4, or maybe just the arrow. There you go. So he's born on June 12th, 43, died before his birthday in 78 at the age of only 34. Go one more over and let's see if that's the one I'm looking for. No, it'll be the one after this. Yet one more. There I am at his grave. And this was while I was chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah. And I don't know if you can zoom in on that or your listeners, viewers can simply watch it, but you'll find engraved in stone under his death date, or in the dark gray area there in the what looks like the border, are the words, "The Libertarian Tax Rebel." Yeah, and then pan down if you can. Or move the image up.
Nope, it ain't working.
Nope. Oh, well, but
it'll be in the episode description linked down below.
And you can read it at findagrave.com. It's a little harder to read because it's on the darker granite. So when I became chair, when I ran for chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah, and Apollo Pizzell, God bless him, Apollo's like, "You'd be a great chair. You'd be a great chair." I'm like, "I don't want to be chair. I don't like libertarians. I don't, it's messy. I like the philosophy. But man, and put it in practice and you get a bunch of," and he's like, "No, you'd be great." So I went to the convention and I stood up and said, "This is how I campaigned for chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah. And I recommend this highly." I began my campaign speech by saying, "I am not a libertarian. I am a philosophical, radical voluntarist. And to the degree that the Libertarian Party is consistent with the principles of radical voluntarism, I support it. I am a fan. I am lit up. I love the Libertarian Party. It comes closer than any other party around today and maybe ever, but it's far from perfect. And to the degree that it doesn't consistently stand on principle for radical voluntarism, I'm not a libertarian. I'm a radical voluntarist." And so if that's who you want as your chair, that's what I'll bring. And then I got elected chair. And I got curious. Who were the chairs before me? And there was no list and no history I could find. And so I contacted a few older chairs, and I learned from Jim Dexter that we had a massive history filing cabinet of stuff that had been collected for the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Libertarian Party of Utah, an event that occurred in 1997 on the 25th anniversary, and that had gone to the state secretary's home, and her home had been stored in a garage, and the garage had been broken into by homeless people, and things were stolen, and then she set fire to the house and it all burned up. It reminds me of that Monty Python, That castle burned down, fell over, and sank into the swamp, but this castle, anyhow, and it was just tragic. But I found a program for the 25th anniversary. And in the program, it listed what they thought was the list of former chairs. I've since documented how some of that is just mistaken and wrong. And then I got an access to newspaperarchive.com and newspapers.com, two great resources for historical research, especially genealogical. And I had been using them to research my own family history out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, with the Fort Wayne papers. So I started researching Karl Bray. And he was writing letters to the editor well before the party was founded by David Nolan, so back into the 60s. He was the chair of the Weber State University Ayn Rand Study Group. He was the chair of Students for Objectivism, some other self-created titles. But in the summer of 72, he was identifying himself as the chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah, even before the founding convention or meeting, which occurred in October of 72. We've got the exact date somewhere. So we're coming up on our 50th anniversary of being founded as a state party. But Karl, and if you look through the Libertarian National News, you can find mentions of Karl for this brief period before he died. Again, he died in 78. For about a year before that, he had this horrible cancer. So he wasn't much of an activist after 76. But he was a very powerful force through 1976 into 1977. He announced he wanted to run for chair of the Libertarian National Committee, but the feds threw him in jail. And so he withdrew, resigned from the LNC, didn't want to bring attention to the LNC for having a felon as one of its members. He was in New York City for the 1975 convention that nominated Roger McBride. And justifiably so. Roger, God bless him, was that elector for Richard Nixon, who in 1972 said, I cannot vote for Richard Nixon. And he cast that one electoral college vote for Dr. John Hospers, the Libertarian nominee, and for Tony Nathan, making Tony Nathan the first woman to receive a vote for president. You know, none of our votes in the states are for president. Technically, what we're all voting for is a slate of electors, and then the electors meet as an electoral college. And I think the design was for them to, you know, look at the will of the people, but also look more carefully at the candidates and then vote their conscience. Well, Roger voted his conscience. So 75 comes around, he gets the nomination for president at the convention, and Karl Bray, according to my friend Hank Hohenstein, and I think Hank might be misremembering, this is an area where I'm still doing research, but there were a couple of tax protesters from Utah, both Karl and a guy named Steve Trotter, who became, I think, the third or fourth chair of the state party. They both were refusing to pay their income taxes. They were both arguing that the IRS was unconstitutional. They had the support, by the way, here in Utah of a former Republican governor, J. Bracken Lee, who you can find out on YouTube videos and in other books. He wrote the foreword. The sitting governor of Utah, wrote the foreword to a book by Frank Chedoroff called Income Tax, the Root of All Evil, that the income tax was going to be the thing that took America away from our founding principles and toward economic destruction and socialism. J. Bracken Lee, as a sitting governor of Utah in the 1950s, refused to pay his federal income tax, wanted to get his case to court and argue that it was absolutely unconstitutional for the federal government to use its taxing authority to take money from American citizens and give that money in part as foreign aid to other nations, that this was a gross violation of the Constitution. And of course, the IRS came in and just seized J. Bracken Lee's bank accounts. But he was a sitting governor of Utah, refusing to pay the income tax and arguing that it was immoral and illegal. And when Karl Bray ran for the United States Congress in 1974 out of Utah, J. Bracken Lee, former Republican governor, endorsed the Libertarian candidate for the United States House in Karl Bray. So back to the convention. I've jumped around and I apologize, but take notes. There will be an exam later. This is how I lectured when I was a college professor. It's not linear. It's designed to cause questions, get you to take notes, want to look things up on your own. I guess that's what I'm doing here on your show again. There's not really a final exam though, but if you want, I'll write one. Anyhow, Karl was in New York City. Roger had just gotten the presidential nomination. There was a lot of enthusiasm to have Karl as the vice presidential nominee. Maybe it was Steve Trotter. I've got conflicting information. We'll see. There's no recordings I'm aware of that convention, but there's some written accounts. And Roger McBride went to the delegates immediately after becoming their presidential nominee and said, if you give me a tax protester for my vice presidential running mate, I will return your nomination. I will not run with a tax protester as my vice presidential nominee. Now, he didn't tell the convention that until after they nominated him. So there was a lot of anger and upset and turmoil, kind of like every convention. And so the convention did not get its business done for that day. They didn't get a vice presidential nominee. They put it off till the next morning. And Hank Hohenstein got on the phone and called his friend in California, David Berglund, and said, go get on a red eye right now, get to San Francisco, hop on a flight, get to New York as fast as you can. You could have the vice presidential nomination tomorrow morning. And Berglund did that. He wasn't at the convention, but he flew out there for it. And Karl Bray got up, and if I'm remembering the written account correctly, calmed the convention down and said Roger McBride is right. If a tax protester would be the vice presidential nominee of the third largest political party in the United States, that would be the whole focus of the campaign. It's going to draw attention away from all the other battles for liberty. It's just going to be focused on the fact that I haven't paid my income tax in 3 or 4 years, and I'm being sued by the feds, and I might wind up in jail during the campaign. At any rate, there were efforts to nominate some other people, including Tony Nathan again, and others, but eventually David Bergland came out of that convention as the vice presidential running mate and then as the candidate 4 years later. I think if Karl had not gotten cancer, I think his time in federal prison was going to be relatively modest. The charges against him were relatively bogus. He eventually won the wage and price control charge, because by the time they got him to court, wage and price controls had gone away. And I think everybody realized that's not good economics. The other crime he had been arrested for was he was having these meetings of tax protesters at the Rocky Mountain Mint and Depository offices. And one night, they decided they would protest the income tax by doing something that had already been done in California without any major consequence in California. But they had a meeting to do it here. And Karl was already on the IRS's radar for this taxation and tyranny pamphlet. And they had printed up, I don't know how many, I'm imagining a few hundred, maybe 1,000 fake IRS tax seizure stickers. So if you're in trouble with the IRS and they decide to claim all of your assets, they'll put a sticker on your house or on your boat or on your car that says this property belongs to the IRS. And so Karl was going to get a team of people to go around Salt Lake putting fake tax seizure notices on several hundred automobiles. Well, the IRS had a mole in the meeting. One of the people Karl trusted who was in the meeting was actually working as an agent for the government. So the meeting ends and Karl comes out, and 3 federal agents throw him to the ground and handcuff him, put him in a car, and take him off to jail. They don't charge him with a crime for 14 hours. They put him in solitary confinement in leg irons. They haul him before a federal magistrate the next day, and Karl's like, what am I being charged with? I've done nothing wrong. And overnight, they had found a crime buried deep in the federal code for misuse of government insignia. Now, this was a crime that was designed to prevent people from pretending to be a colonel in the U.S. Army or an inspector or an FBI agent using a fake badge. Well, maybe that should be a crime. Maybe you shouldn't be pretending to be a federal agent if you're not one. But they stretched that to the tax seizure sticker being an official government insignia. And they charged him with the crime of possessing them, not distributing them, not doing anything that caused any upset for anybody. And that charge becomes even more absurd because the next day, the print media in Utah ran a photograph of an IRS agent holding one of the fake IRS tax seizure notices, such that everybody who subscribed to the paper, if that law was consistently applied, should have now been held guilty for possession of an IRS insignia. It's just a crazy crime. So I'd like to believe that had Karl not died in 1978, that he might have gone on to become chair of the Libertarian National Committee, or perhaps even our presidential candidate. He in that brief period from 71 to 76 or so, appeared on radio stations all over the country. You can find him in state party newsletters all over the country, appearing as the keynote speaker One that comes to mind, I can still see the images, Libertarian Party of Texas had him out there. I know he was on WGN in Chicago. And he was sought after. When the convention was held in 1977 in San Francisco, he was asked by Nathaniel Brandon to give the introduction of Nathaniel to that convention. So the more I learn about Karl Bray, the more heartbroken I am that he didn't get to live a long and productive life, and the angrier I am at the federal government. Can you imagine throwing someone into solitary confinement with handcuffs and leg irons over a crime of having a piece of paper they didn't want you to have?
Because it could be a threat. Yeah.
I didn't know what the threat was. At most, it would have been kind of a Burning Man-esque performance art. Get people calling the IRS saying, "Why did you seize my car?" And they say, "No, it's a fake sticker." The other thing is the real stickers were printed in color. So they had red ink. This was like a 1970s version of photocopying. It was in black ink only. And the IRS could have answered the phone a few times and said, "No, that's a fake thing." And some people are out there engaging in their First Amendment rights to protest taxation. I get that you're upset, but you shouldn't be upset at the IRS. You should be upset at these stupid protesters. No, instead they throw him in jail with no charge overnight. What is this? The Soviet Union. And then Judge Ritter was the federal judge here in Utah that heard this case and sentenced Karl to 6 months in federal prison for illegal possession of a piece of paper. I'll talk about Judge Ritter for a moment. And I know I'm getting kind of into the weeds, but this is part of the party history that absolutely fascinates me. Judge Ritter was insane. This man was nuts. He sued as a sitting federal judge, both sitting United States senators from Utah. The United States Department of Justice went to the Supreme Court to get a writ from the Supreme Court prohibiting federal Judge Ritter from hearing any cases in which the United States of America was either a defendant or a party in the prosecution. The Department of Justice didn't want Judge Ritter hearing cases. When the Department of Justice did that, the state attorney general of Utah went to federal court to ask for the same ruling be applied to any issues involving the state of Utah. This judge, to put it simply, was nuts. He was single. He was bitter. He was living in a hotel. He was also in ill health. And one of the proofs to me that there is a loving creator, a God, a Lord in heaven, is Judge Ritter died of cancer about 6 weeks before Karl Bray passed away. I've bought his biography, Thunder Over Zion, but it's just this whitewashed glorification of this guy. And he was a talented law professor. He was certainly a competent attorney. But boy, he got appointed to the federal bench and let his ego run wild. And you can read the transcripts of him dealing with Karl. Karl accused the judge of being biased against him. He tried to get him impeached. And of course, that didn't go over very well with the good judge. But there's transcripts of the trial where the judge says something to Karl like, "I'm not going to let a young whippersnapper like you get away with these kind of things in my court." And there's another attorney unrelated to the Karl Bray issue who filed a complaint against the federal judge because the judge was making hissing noises while this attorney was trying to present his case to the jury. So the attorney stops and says, "Judge Ritter, what do you got a problem? Or you know if they're hissing?" And he says, "No, you just remind me of a snake." And then he kept making hissing noises while this guy was trying to present his argument to a jury. One more. Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes, who, are you too young for 60 Minutes? And
No.
It was a big deal, network television, investigative news program. In January of 1978, so just a couple of months before Ritter dies and about 6 months before Karl dies, 60 Minutes did an expose on Judge Ritter. and interviewed a reporter for KSL TV who basically said, yeah, the LDS Church does not want any of its cases heard in front of Judge Ritter either. So Karl got dealt a pretty bad hand, both with this outrageous charge that I don't think anyone, the news coverage at the time says nobody had ever been charged with this as a crime ever before, illegal possession of a government insignia. I don't think anyone's been charged since under that statute. It was just Karl. It was a made-up charge. There wasn't much he could do about it. He got a crazy federal judge, and the result of that was he had to spend 6 months in federal prison, including at Terminal Island off the coast of California. Boy, I might actually invite your listeners to stay in touch. Let's all get together. I want to go up to that cemetery outside of Heber City, Utah, and visit the good judge's grave up there, Willis W. Ritter. And well, I won't tell you exactly what I want to do when I get there, but you can probably imagine.
Meet us up there. You'll find out.
I would, yeah, let's have a party. We'll all go up there, and we'll let Judge Ritter experience the kind of treatment from us that he gave to Karl. We can find a way to manifest that in a symbolic and appropriate and performance art-based non-initiation of aggression, but a response to what he did to Karl.
Yes.
I mean, it's a tragic story. And that was our founding chair. And yet here it was in 2017, I became chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah. And I'm not aware of anybody in Utah that knew any of this history at that time. Somehow we forgot about Karl. Now, the state of California, where Karl also lived and where his wife, Donna Noble, was, and they were engaged in protests in California as well. Karl also was credited by the California party with getting John Hospers on the ticket out there, I think, or maybe it was McBride 4 years later, but he did a lot of signature gathering and all that. The Libertarian Party of California still gives its Volunteer of the Year, the Karl Bray Volunteer of the Year Award. So California remembers Karl more than Utah did, even though this is where he grew up. Went to BYU briefly, Weber State, so I'm spending some time bringing Karl back into the consciousness of everybody in the party here. Did that video? You can link to it if you want off my YouTube channel.
Yeah,
it's called the First Libertarian Martyr, and it's a found audio of Karl giving an interview. Quality of the audio was terrible, cassette tape, recorded under the landing pattern at the Indianapolis airport, I think, with squeaky chairs and off mic. But I got about 20 good minutes of audio out of that, processed it, and then I tied the video to newspaper headlines. Karl had thousands and thousands of newspaper headlines. Now, sometimes it was the same story that's repeated across 300 papers in every town across America. So that's fun to dig through on newspaperarchive.com. But he's probably got, I don't know, 40 letters to the editor that I'm working on transcribing all of them. And then probably at least 100, maybe 200 unique newspaper stories about his battles with the federal government and his performance art dressing up as, there's a newspaper that actually has a photo of him on a horse with the tricorner hat on as Paul Revere giving out his Karl Bray dollars.
You know, who would have known that sleepy little Utah was so based? You know, that's one reason why I wanted to get you on and tell this story, because once I had first heard it, we had attended that evening at your house, an evening with Scott Horton, and hearing that story, it sent chills down my spine.
Yeah, you saw the alpha version of that video. I had just thrown a few little things together to kind of do a proof of concept, but I think in some ways that was more powerful because I only had the headlines for the first third. And then we sat in my home theater just listening to Karl's voice pretty much in the dark.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I cried.
Yeah.
What happened to him is so unfair and so antithetical to the principles on which this nation was founded, that I just, I don't know, I fear for our future. The federal government's certainly out of control. Its spending is a nightmare. And now, we're seeing the results of that with the high inflation, and there's probably more of that to come. But I'd like to think that the feds could not do this kind of thing again. That if they tried to do wage and price controls, there would be a revolt. If they tried to bring back the draft, there would be a revolt. If they tried to shoot another student with the National Guard pointing live weapons at college kids, that there would be a revolt. I'd like to think that's the America that I live in. But boy, we sure tolerate a lot of tyranny that just people actually defend. All we
No.
need somebody. I mean, I have a daughter who's a medical doctor, and I try to talk to her about free market medical care. And she didn't study economics in college. She studied medicine, and she's like, well, the federal government has to do something. We've got to take care of people.
Well, the federal government's the wrong way to do it because all they know is violence.
I want to take care of people too. I want an
Mhm.
economy that thrives because of minimal taxation, and out of that creates innovation and charitable activity that really do provide state-of-the-art medical care for free, to everybody who can't afford it or deserves it or whatever. But it's with local charity you can discern who needs a helping hand and who needs a kick in the butt. But when you do it from the federal government down, there's no discernment of the difference between those two. I'd like everybody to be educated for free, funded by charity, and that's kind of happening. Your channel is an example of that. I wrote back 20 years ago. I was teaching at Western Governors University, and I wrote something about how YouTube was going to be the educational platform of the future. And man, I got hammered. YouTube, it's just cat videos and zoo videos. Well, one of our other daughters became a biotech genius and married a guy and moved to San Francisco. And her husband has a YouTube channel with 4 million subscribers, being translated into at least a dozen other languages for free by volunteers. Just makes his money off Patreon. And what he's done is visualize math. So he animates graduate level math and visualizes it.
That's incredible.
And it's called 3 Blue 1 Brown, 3blue1brown.com. And he's got graduate students all over the planet that are, if you're a visual learner, then this is the place for you. Maybe there's other math students who don't learn it visually and they find other resources, which is fine. But I see some of his fan mail, and he's got, YouTube viewers writing him. I didn't think I could ever understand this. I was failing my math class. I watched your videos. I got an A on the exam. My professor pulled me into his office because he thought I had cheated. I showed him your channel, and now he's using it in class. So
that's incredible.
The competition on YouTube for viewers is going to get the best educators, the biggest audience, because democracy, right? This is it's not just about voting. It's about people voting with their feet or with their eyeballs. And if you can create value, and Grant's doing it for free, right? I think he gets a couple $100,000 every time he puts a new video up. I don't know. He doesn't talk finances with his father-in-law, but it's for free. It's whatever money he's making is maybe off of advertising or off of Patreon donations, or simply people who go, wow, you're making a big difference on the earth. I want to give you some money. And he's one of hundreds of thousands of YouTubers who are trying to educate us. So today, if I have a problem with my 1998 Road Trek RV, and I need to figure out how to clean the propane tube on the back of the refrigerator, and I'm not sure how to get it out of the van, 25 years ago, you'd have to go to a library or find a mechanic or some hidden away tech manual somewhere. Today, go on YouTube and there's like 6 or 7 people who've pulled their fridge out and they all have a video on YouTube about how to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
YouTube University.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's honestly incredible. And that's why this whole attitude of, well, we need the government because people won't donate money or anything. And it's like, have you seen what people do when they are able to just be free and can innovate things? We are we are capable of incredible things if we're just allowed to do so.
Right.
I really like your analogy of, 100% taxation is slavery. Well, through historical examples, you can see when government is maximized to its top level, the most amount of people die possible in just the most horrific and violent ways possible.
Yeah,
So,
don't tell me I'm not someone who deeply cares about the well-being of others because I want to eliminate forced taxation in most government programs.
exactly.
No, I want free education for everybody. I want state-of-the-art medical care where innovation and development of new technologies and drugs and therapies is rewarded hugely, so we get more of that. Instead, it's punished. And, I used to talk to my dad, who was also a physician, but he was a Roosevelt Democrat. We need government and Social Security is a good thing. And we should have dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and all these interesting conversations with my dad. But, and he was a guy who was giving a lot of it away. Really good guy. Now I'm going to forget the point I was going to make about medical care, medical innovation. I have gotten lost, but a similar point that's in the ballpark of that was my dad and I would talk about how if we had federalized, socialized healthcare at the time the nation was founded, he'd still be using leeches on people, right? We're not rewarding innovation. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The conversation with my dad. People argue that healthcare costs are out of control, right? And there's lots of evidence for that. The inflation rate of prescription drugs and hospital stays and all that. Well, it's largely because of the federal government. They limit the number of medical schools. They limit the number of people who can be admitted to medical school. If you want to build a hospital, do you know what you have to go through for government permitting to decide to have a new hospital in some location? It's ridiculous. But in my view, the cost of medical care has come down dramatically. No Rockefeller, no Carnegie, no president could get an MRI for any amount of money in the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1950s. You want to go get an MRI in the 1960s? You barely get an X-ray. So yeah, an MRI costs $100,000 or something, but it used to cost infinite amount of money. Infinite down to $100,000 as a reduction in cost. It became available.
Yeah.
But we don't look at it that way. We look at it like, oh, it costs a fortune and we need the government to stop it costing a fortune. So the government comes in and tries to disrupt the market forces that have created these new technologies. And what they do is extinguish them. That, at least in my view, is very uncaring for others. A libertarian, and libertarians do a poor job of this. I was talking to a libertarian candidate running actively, and they wanted me to consult them about their campaign. And like, I'm just going to run on the message that we need to get the libertarians in charge so we can be left alone. We just want to get the federal government out of our pocketbook, out of our bedroom. We all want to be left alone. And I said, well, that is the least inspiring message that a libertarian can offer. I get where you're coming from. I get your passion for it. Yeah, I want to be left alone too. But no, more than that, I want every kid on the planet fed. I want every kid on the planet, every adult to have a safe place to sleep at night. I want everyone to get an education. I want everyone to get state-of-the-art healthcare. And I want to give them to whether they can afford it or not. And the only path I see to living on a planet that does that for others is one where productivity is rewarded and taxation is seen as theft. And don't tell me I don't care about others, because that's the path that I see leading to that kind of abundance, where maybe wars could end because there's just nothing much left to fight over. We're all pretty well off, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I want. And that candidate I was talking to went, "That's right." It was another one of those kind of like light bulb moments of, that's the message libertarians ought to be offering. Learn some economics and you'll see that if you punish productivity with onerous taxation and permitting and regulation and prohibitions, eventually you get less productivity, less innovation.
Yeah.
And what we need is more of that, because listen, the medical care we have today, hopefully seen from 200 years from now, is going to look as horrifying as what they did to George Washington. You know, give him shots of mercury and let the what would they call them? You had to open the veins to let the noxious gases out. Yeah, they killed him.
Yeah.
Best doctors in the world totally killed him. And I think that's the case today. I was just talking to my daughter yesterday because she called me on Father's Day. And I said, listen, how much of what you learned in medical school is already obsolete? And she says, really interesting question. She said, most of the drugs that I learned about in medical school for treating diabetes are no longer recommended. There's all sorts of new therapies out there. Wow. And I said, I think in your career, maybe not in my lifetime, but I think in your career, you will have returned to the pharmacopoeia of what physicians have access to, cannabis and psilocybins, especially for end-of-life care and anxiety and PTSD and suicidal ideation. Our federal government scheduled 1 cannabis, a drug with no potential or current medicinal value. Well, that's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a self-evident hypocrisy. This was Nixon's racist war on the anti-war left. They smoked pot. We can't go after them for being opposed to Vietnam, but we can throw their ass in jail for smoking pot.
51 years ago today.
Was that today?
Today. Yep.
Yeah, that guy. Wage and price controls and the war on drugs. And it's not a war. It's not a war on drugs. It's a war on innocent people who use a drug to no ill effect. And I'm sure you know this, but I'll repeat it anyway. We have more young Black males held today behind bars in federal cages than were held at the height of slavery in the United States. More young Black males, nonviolent crime, dealing pot. You mentioned Dr. Paul earlier, and I love me Dr. Paul. I voted for him in 1988. I attended the Mises Bash in Reno, where Dr. Paul spoke. I sat in the front row, got up and left before his speech was over because I had somebody else waiting to meet me across the way, and it was running way late. But I watched the video of that speech later, and I watched Dr. Paul's performance in those Republican primary debates. And, Dr. Paul said, Gary Johnson was going around saying, well, we just need to legalize cannabis and everything else should stay Schedule 1. I'm like, oh, Gary, you panderer. Yep. Dr. Paul said, why do we have laws outlawing heroin? How many of you in this audience are going to go out and use heroin tomorrow because it's legal? Do we really think the reason people in America aren't using heroin is because the federal government said don't? No. When you prohibit something, you drive interest. More people are using heroin because it's illegal, because that puts a big light on it for folks who are attracted to do the thing that's forbidden. Right? Yep. Prohibition did not work for alcohol. And it seems we learned nothing from that. But, when alcohol prohibition went away, there was a big law enforcement force. They need to find something to keep them employed. And they gave them the war on drugs eventually. But prohibition didn't work in the war on drugs. It's not working today. You can't keep drugs out of our federal prisons, for God's sakes. We're supposed to turn the whole country into a federal prison to try to keep. No, it's not working. Didn't work for alcohol prohibition. And get this, it didn't work for the Lord God Almighty with the Garden of Eden either. Right? Of that tree ye shall not touch. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm real curious what that tree's about now.
Yeah, that was the one tree that was touched.
It's just so self-evidently stupid. But I think beyond the stupidity is a real organized set of individuals or forces that use that to their advantage for whatever anti-liberty, nefarious, power-grubbing orientation they have to life that is not one that I've had anything to do with since that moment where I first heard about a political party that had 10 Stoffel on its flag.
So one question I had for you, because I've been thinking about it ever since we had decided to do this, and I don't really talk internal party politics on my show. Nobody cares. it's the only people who care are libertarians, and even most of them don't care. So, considering how things are now, what you know about the history of the party, how you feel personally, at this point in time, should people join the Libertarian Party? Are we going to be moving in a great direction? And I know some of this is yet to be seen, but
well, and I don't know where you are. Are you a Mises Caucus loyalist? Is that what brought you in 2 years ago? Ron Paul Revolution 2?
I mean, I am Mises Caucus.
That's okay.
However, I definitely, if I disagree with something, I'm not going to just go with it because I'm going to say I disagree with it.
That was my impression of a lot of Mises people in Reno. Not all, maybe not even most. I did walk past a couple of delegates who had just arrived and said, wow, now that I'm here, I just can't wait to be told what to do. I almost stopped to go, what? That is like the most anti-libertarian thing I think I've ever heard. You just showed up to be told how to vote? But I kept walking. I know there were delegates there who had no idea what NOTA stood for or why that's required on our ballots. And you think, well, this is a very well organized, very effective takeover that took a fair amount of money that people never imagined somebody would spend to take over the Libertarian Party. I'll tell you what I'm tired of. Name calling, for one. I have a good friend who thinks I'm worse than the Mises Caucus. I'm the German in Germany who didn't stop the Nazis when they were taken over because they hadn't done enough bad stuff yet. And I should have stood up. I'm part of the old guard of the Libertarian Party that didn't fight to keep the Nazis from taking over. Okay, I'll own it. I'm the worst libertarian ever. Fine, I got it. As far as I know, nobody I've met in the Mises Caucus is even remotely a Nazi. Our vice chair says some things that I find disgusting and horrifying. He just posted a thing about needing a flag in his front yard for Pride Month that had the symbol of this somehow to advertise to his neighbors that he was a heterosexual and not a homosexual. I'm sorry. He needs more gay friends. Gay pride is not about sex. It's about liberty-loving individuals who were persecuted and threatened with death and housing discrimination and job discrimination over who they choose to love. And it's about a lot more than just sex. I got gay friends who are more solid in their marriage than I've been, in mine. And Cindy and I, coming up on 30 years and we're hanging in there, but being married is hard. And I have a friend in Louisville, Greg Burke, and his husband, Michael, whose last name I forget. They're the plaintiffs in Kentucky for Burke versus Bashir, demanding the right to gay marriage. Greg Burke and his husband, Michael, were present in the Supreme Court when the ruling came down granting equal rights for marriage to gays. And Joe Bishop Henchman was there as well. So I have two friends who were in the Supreme Court for that decision. So yeah, what the current vice chair of the Libertarian National Committee is putting out, I'm not a big fan of some of that, but I'm also a pretty hardcore free speech guy, and let the chips fall where they may. when you look back at the history of the party, though, this is really, I think, nothing new. Mises may be better organized and better funded and more articulate than any other effort, but David Nolan, the founder of the Libertarian Party, was not at all happy with Ed Clark as a presidential candidate. Not at all. And felt like they had abandoned the party of principle to compromise and pander, to economic conservatives. It's 1979. The party wasn't even a decade old yet. And David and others,
he was already being a libertarian then.
Yeah, they formed the December 11th group, a shadow LNC. December 11th was the founding date, December 11th, 1971, Colorado Springs, where they voted to found a new party, put out a press release in January, had a convention the following June. There's all sorts of dates you could say, well, this is where it started. But less than 10 years later, you got the founder of the party creating an alternative to the LNC. And there were arguments back then, like the ones with Andre Maru. If we remove Ed Clark as our presidential nominee and replace him, we'll get more earned media by putting up a pure libertarian. Where's the pure libertarian? Maybe Ron Paul. I don't know. So in that sense, it's nothing new. Jeremy Kauffman running for the United States Senate up in New Hampshire, dressed in a lizard costume? Really? Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And I want to be a senator, and they're all lizard people, so I'm going to dress as a lizard.
It's no different than being naked on stage or a boot on your head.
Wasn't too happy with either of those either.
Me either.
But I'll tell you what, I'm more offended by Bill Weld being a vice presidential nominee than any of that. That also upsets my friend. Bill Weld was the most libertarian governor ever. All right, great. But you don't get to come into the Libertarian Party as a non-member and instantly go to vice presidential candidate. Just no. No, I did not vote for Bill Weld in Orlando, and I had this good friend screaming at me on the floor of the convention. There's no prohibitions on language here, right? Shall I use the direct quote? Fuck you, Joe Buchman. Fuck you. Just as loud as you could. And I'm like, you've already won. You're going to get Weld. And they had done some delegate stacking then. They got some people in there to be sure Weld got that nomination. So I don't see that as different in anything other than the magnitude for what Mises pulled off in Reno. Nick Gillespie of Reason Magazine was conducting a bunch of interviews, and he asked me to sum up the convention. This was after it was completely over. I was getting ready to take a friend of mine back to the airport. And he said, just sum up the convention in one or two words. How do you feel? And I said, vigilantly curious. Vigilantly curious. I told the Utah State Convention, if you choose to have me serve as one of your delegates to the convention, I don't know who I'm going to vote for chair. I'll listen to the chair's debate and decide. And then for the rest of the office positions, I will give my vote to whoever that chair wants on their team, even if that's Karen Ann Harlos, who I think has no business being anywhere near any position on any board of any organization. So, yeah. Do Libertarian Party history, was a founding member of that historical preservation committee, and don't play well with Karen Ann Harlos. That would be me. I'm the guy who was entrusted with digitizing all of David Nolan's personal files. Out of that, I got to know Elizabeth Nolan really well. Learned that she had tried to donate the files to MIT, and MIT turned her down. She really wanted them to go to an academic organization. Karen Ann knew all of that, but Karen Ann wanted those papers shipped over to Denver as soon as they were digitized. And instead, I reached out to the Library of Congress, and they acquired the collection, and Elizabeth is thrilled. And I'm sorry if your viewers want to disagree with me. I know Karen Ann does, but I happen to think the Library of Congress is a better place to preserve history than the storage shed that the Libertarian Party is paying for over in Denver. Just wild, crazy thinking on my part. I went to a member of the LNC in Reno and said, what do you think about all that? And he said, well, Joe, this is somebody who was on the LNC and currently still sitting on it, which I think leaves you with 2 or 3 people. He says, well, Joe, the Library of Congress is a federal agency. I'm uncomfortable having party records preserved by the federal government. You know, they're seeing all of our secret files. And I said, well, it's Rich Bowen. We'd served together on the audit committee. I said, Rich, if you think the federal government learned anything new about the Libertarian Party from David Nolan's personal files 12 years after he had died, I want to know what you're smoking, because I'm getting old. I want to try all these drugs. What can you recommend? And he's like, yeah, good point. I said, but you have an even bigger error in what you just said. Do you see it? And he said, no, what are you talking about? I said, they were not party property. They were Elizabeth Nolan's cherished inheritance when she became a widow. They went to where she wanted them to go. They didn't belong to the party. And he's like, well, yeah, that's a good point. And then after I did that thing, I found the boilerplate letters she had prepared to a number of universities and to the Library of Congress. She had done that before I ever met her. And I learned that David Nolan's father, John Lester Nolan, had adopted David and adopted his sister Barbara. This couple took in 2 kids. God bless them for doing that. And John Lester Nolan's career was as the director of the reference division of the Library of Congress. David's files went back to his daddy's library. David's sister, Barbara, who goes by the name Ekta now, is just thrilled. Who are you that you got my brother's papers to our daddy's library? I'm like, I'm just a nerd. But boy, I got some people angry at me, including Karen Ann over that one. But I'm sorry. I will go with the library that's housing Thomas Jefferson's books as a part of the federal government, that if libertarians in a libertarian utopia were to take over, I'd like to think that the bricks housing Thomas Jefferson's books would be the last bricks we would choose to dismantle. And I've also provided people who are concerned with the link at the Library of Congress website where you can make a private donation for the Library of Congress to take its work to another level. They don't survive only on tax money. They also solicit voluntary contribution. So let's make the Library of Congress a completely non-taxpayer supported voluntary institution so we can all be happy. The other thing I was hoping, and I've kind of given up hope on this, was since the convention in 2024 is in DC, I would have liked to have seen some sort of Library of Congress gallery display of early Libertarian Party history that delegates could be invited over to the Library of Congress for, or Dr. David Reft, the guy I work with at the library, mentioned the library might be willing to bring over a display case to the convention center and provide some docent-like people there to share what they have. And so they'll have about a year to go through the accession process now before that convention happens. Year and a half, maybe. What question was I answering now? I know I've gone way down some tangent. I don't even remember.
It is really, so I guess I'll boil the question down with
the takeover.
Well, less about the takeover and more about your personal opinion of, is the party, are you still looking forward to tomorrow to be calling yourself a libertarian? I mean, as cautious as you may be, are you at least hopeful?
Well, see, I've never called myself a libertarian. I'm a philosophical radical voluntarist.
We did cover that.
And so am I uncomfortable being branded a libertarian? Yeah, kind of. But that makes me angry because it's due to distortion by the other parties and the media. We are not what they paint us to be at their worst painting of that, clearly. So I think, yeah, I'll own libertarian because screw you for making it mean something it doesn't mean. I'm not a racist. I'm not a Republican who wants to smoke pot. Just go away. You don't have a clue what's going on here. Just stop. And yet I'm also disturbed by things like the message that the vice chair was sending out on Pride Day or Pride Month or whatever. I think kind of missed the point there. Michael Heiss Interview with Nick Gillespie of Reason Magazine. Nick says, Michael, let me read you this quote. And it was something like, every state that Mises has fucked loves our dick now.
Yeah, that gets this dick loves it. Yeah.
What is he thinking? I want to call Phil Lammy, who's, my neighbor here in Alpine. I think he's in the bishopric of the Mormon Church. I'm like, are you okay with that? Do I misunderstand Mormons? How is this rape metaphor a good idea? On the other hand, I had a nice conversation with Michael for about a half an hour. I congratulated him, on his efficiency. Told my friend that. He's like, the Nazis could run the trains on time too.
That's pretty creative at that point.
But I mean, at the end of that interview with Nick Gillespie of Reason, Nick says, well, what do you want to tell people who are concerned about Mises? And he just says, judge us by our fruits. So that's very much where I am. Maybe I'm compromised. Maybe I'm unprincipled. Maybe I should walk away and spew vomit in my path like Joe Bishop Henchman and Andy Craig and others have done. People I respect, by the way. I think Joe Bishop Henchman's done more to advance liberty than the Libertarian Party ever has or can hope to. That guy gets into the Supreme Court and argues for liberty in powerful ways. Andy Craig, deep thinker at Cato, writes brilliant stuff. But man, are they out to burn the party down now? Or so it seems to me. I'm not that. I'm not in Mises going, yeah, we need Ron Paul revolution too. Can't we find some young people? I mean, my goodness, they're like, Trump's going to get reelected in How does Trump get reelected in 2024? He's like 110 years old and in ill health. And Biden's thinking about running. Why? What? Don't we have anybody under the age of, I don't know, I'm 64. Maybe we could find a 60-year-old or a 50-year-old. And so I kind of feel the same way about Ron Paul. It's like, aren't there any young guys out there? And then Justin Amash. I'm impressed that Justin is hanging in there. I think if Justin can hang in there through this, so can I. And he's basically said the same thing as let's see him perform, right? They earned the positions they got elected to. I'm sorry, I'm just going down a tangent in my own head, which I guess I'll share. I think Karen Ann got that position through fraud. She was not a whistleblower. I was on the investigative committee for New Hampshire. This was not whistleblower retaliation throwing her off that committee. She called the other members of the board rat fucks in YouTube videos and put up videos about each of them. You can still go watch her. She just condemns them all for their massive corruption. No, just no. But it was a great card to play to get reelected. And now we'll see. Maybe she's grown from that experience and won't so easily slander people like me and others. I mean, I'm the elder abusing psychopath who stole party property to give it to the feds. Really? That's what I did? All right, I'll own it. That's great. It's because it's so absurd, right? And it was equally absurd. Some of the things that were said in her ability to fully articulate a massive victimhood environment that created sympathy among people who don't know her as well as they should. But by and large, I mean, yeah, they got elected, they earned it, they got the people there, they got the enthusiasm there, they got money behind it. I voted for Angela because I thought Steve Dossbach was terrible in that debate. Joe Hopman, oh my goodness,
that wasn't a debate.
I caught a lot of crap for that. But what I didn't understand about Mises was your new chair came out and asked for Eric Rodsap to be the detail-oriented guy she needed as vice chair, and y'all gave her Joshua Smith instead. And I was voting for Eric because that's who the chair wanted, and that's what I said I would do.
So I believe that the caucus, a large portion of the caucus, anyways, enough to get the vice chair elected, is more than enough evidence that it's not necessarily take these orders and do as we say.
Well, I think Nick Sarwark and those who realized they had lost so horribly threw all their votes behind Justin to try to throw a monkey wrench into the new board. And
Yeah.
screw that. I think if it hadn't been for the anti-Mises people kind of united around giving him back this somewhat crazy vice chair, that maybe Eric would have won. And they were angry at me for not going along with that strategy, and angry at me for not going along with the strategy of let's try to run the clock out so we don't lose the abortion plank. You know, I don't play those kind of games, I guess. Maybe I've become unprincipled, and I'm not a good warrior, and I'm not fighting against people who don't play by the rules. And I'm still wanting to play by the rules. Oh, you should have seen
I disagree with that.
The emails I got after we did our investigatory committee report. One of my friends wrote me and said, I knew this was going to be bad, but I didn't think it could have been written by Karen Ann, who said, I'm going to pay no attention to the investigative committee report because Joe Buchman's on that committee and he's just out to get me. Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't out to get Karen Ann. If anything, I overcorrected for not bringing any personal bias or animus to that. But her actions, as seen by the other two members of that committee, one of whom is Rufus Craig, an attorney, no, she was not somebody who engaged in whistleblowing activity that then got her punished for doing that. I think the more reasonable argument is she was someone trying to build a YouTube channel who knew that one strategy for doing that quickly is by creating a lot of drama. And she fueled the drama, in my view. And anyhow, so how do I feel? I'm also getting older, and I'm thinking maybe it's kind of time to sort of semi-retire, not really running much of a campaign right now for treasurer, but I think about it from time to time. I don't think I want to run for any more state offices or be a state party chair again. I could see myself serving, on the audit committee nationally. I've done that 3 times. I always serve a term and take a term off. I don't think the audit committee should be consecutive terms. Most recently, I was the chair of the financial audit committee, so I got to see a lot of the stuff that goes on inside the party that I signed an NDA not to talk about. And no organization is perfect, but I think without sharing any details, I feel really good about how the Libertarian Party operated over the last 2 financial cycles. I haven't seen any numbers since December of 2021, and I won't because I'm no longer on the committee. And I probably won't ask to be reappointed. But maybe I would do that when I'm 68 or 70, in another 2 years, 4 years, something like that. What about you? Are you just like, hey, Mises is taking over and it's a freight train headed to glory? Are you excited?
Hell no.
Okay.
I am excited. At this point, I mean, I've been treated very terribly by anti-Mises people.
I wish they would stop that.
Yeah. Even at this point, I know, some of the celebritarians will say they're unwilling to work with unreasonable people, and I understand the sentiment. I don't give up the hope, though. Even just yesterday on Twitter, I was trying to reason with somebody and say, hey, you don't have to like everything anyone ever does. And if you're waiting to build a perfect party filled full of everyone that you like, we're never getting anything done. There's certain things that are just more important than your personal beliefs about one issue. And either keep focusing on that and get squashed by the jackboot, or you got to set it aside for a minute. We've got more pressing matters. I am very hopeful that Mises is everything everyone says it is at face value. I am buying into it, and the moment that the entire movement, the entire organization, if it were found out that it was not, I would be the first person to criticize it and admit that I was wrong.
I'll tell you the other thing that concerns me about anti-Mises people, if you want, is they seem to really hold people in their history. And apparently Tom Woods published some stuff maybe in the 80s or early 90s that isn't easily found or available and that he doesn't say anymore. And I'm like, are we going to hold everybody who has that light bulb movement of, wow, radical nonviolence and self-ownership, that's the libertarian vision, I'm now a libertarian? We're going to dig up stuff that they did or said before that and use it as a cudgel somehow? I'm tired of that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've got this friend of mine who says, look, everybody thinks these people are going to come into the Libertarian Party and they're going to become more libertarian with time. Well, yeah, that's kind of how it works. It used to be, what's the difference between a libertarian who's a member of the what's the difference between a libertarian who's a member of the pragmatist caucus and a libertarian who's a member of the radical caucus? And the answer was about a year and a half.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So I'm hopeful for that. I certainly found my one conversation with Michael to be, he was much younger than I had imagined. I didn't even have an image of what he looked like before Reno. I didn't care. I've now, get the Mises Caucus emails and updates, everything I've seen coming from the chair. And most others seems not offensive. The vice chair's comments, I think, are disgusting and should be repudiated, whatever. Or he should go get some gay friends so he can learn that it's not about sex. It's about violence. These are people who, if they went to about 13 nations on earth, could just be killed for saying they were gay. John Hospers, when he ran as our presidential nominee, couldn't campaign in some states. And I guess it's unclear whether Hospers was really gay or not, but he was never openly gay in his lifetime. But it's pretty clear he was a gay man who, during that campaign, could have been thrown in jail just for saying I'm gay, or for saying I have a photocopy of a government insignia. I think throw you in jail for anything they want to throw you in jail for.
Mm-hmm. Which is our common enemy, which is something I think we could bond over.
I would too. I thought Spike Cohen's reformulation of the bigotry language was very good. I liked, resonated with the argument that our platform should be about relations between the government and its citizens and not relations between individuals. But yeah, I would totally go to the next convention wearing a hat that said bigotry is repugnant and irrational. I don't have any problem with that language at all. Michael Heiss came running to the back of the hall right after that vote, and people were cheering the deletion of the word bigot from the platform. And I overheard Michael say, this is the first organization that has taken a step away from becoming more woke. Might not be a direct quote. Michael, forgive me if I'm misquoting. Feel free to correct it. But there was this cheering of the Libertarian Party is going to stop sliding to being more woke. And this was somehow a turning point away from that. And then I watched the interview with Angela McArdle and Nick Gillespie, where she said, look, we can't have the word bigot in our platform because nobody knows what it means. All it results in is finger pointing. I'm not unsympathetic to that. And I did like the reformulated language that Spike put out. On abortion, that's the issue that's ripping every political party apart, right? And maybe especially us. But my argument on abortion is I think life begins at conception. And I don't want a federal government so intrusive that it knows. The federal government has no business knowing if any of my 3 daughters are pregnant today and tomorrow and the next day. So the very first Libertarian Party platform in 1972 said women should have the right to an abortion everywhere, anytime, any reason, for the first 100 days. I kind of like that. I thought Roe v. Wade maybe got it close to right, which is first trimester, none of the government's business. Third trimester, government acts to protect the unborn. In between, we'll leave it up to the states. That was the original formalization of Roe v. Wade. I have a good friend, married couple, both good friends, who had a kind of a late term abortion after they got the ultrasound that showed that the unborn baby only had 2 chambers in his heart. And you don't live a good life with half a heart. You don't develop mentally, physically. You have a life of a lot of pain and suffering. And they lovingly chose to abort. And that little baby lived for several hours. These are not people who did an unethical, immoral, illegal thing. And the government should have no business in that. So I'm not too happy about the elimination of the plank, partly because when I was on the platform committee, I helped change the language. One word, but I was proud of that word. The abortion plank said something like libertarians respect views on both sides of the issue. And I was at that platform committee in Indianapolis and said, since when are there only 2 sides to the abortion issue? there are far more than 2 sides.
Yeah.
So it got changed to libertarians respect the positions on all sides of the abortion issue. So that was my one significant contribution to that platform committee that year, and it got thrown out in Reno. So I'm, again, vigilantly curious, what's next? Are we going to have a anti-abortion plank proposed in 2024? I don't know.
So one interesting point that was made by Karen Ann, I did think this was very interesting, that the plank that was put in about personal medical freedom could now be interpreted as the new pro-choice.
Well, she's the master of parliamentary massaging to get stuff like that out where it may not have existed or been intended. But you know what? Praise the good where you find it. Good for Karen Ann. I like that.
So I personally don't believe the party itself should necessarily have a position. I believe it to be a social issue that should be left up to the philosophers and the doctors and the women and the families, and it has nothing to do.
That was our plank. That was what the plank said, was we respect principal points of views on all sides. So we take it out. We're silent about it. I mean, I don't think abortion...
I would vote against a anti-abortion plank.
And you think most of Mises would? It's hard to tell.
I don't know. It's probably like the open borders thing. Mises is split half and half. So, it's interesting because I think the number one misconception of Mises is that it's completely decentralized. And so even though Michael is, chair and, there is an executive committee and all of these things, it's not like Ohio Mises Caucus tells Utah what to do or anything like that. Each state really is independent of each other. And it really does live up by that decentralized nature.
Go ahead.
Well, it just the fact that there is, because of that decentralization, then it's difficult to explain that to people who are not involved. And so everyone says, oh, well, because of New Hampshire's tweets, then the whole system needs to come down. The whole system doesn't need to be trusted. And it's like, look, yeah, that was bad. I'm not a fan of that. But guess what? I called that out. That has nothing to do with me. So don't you label me with that.
I thought in the course of that investigation that Gilletta Jarvis had her heart in the right place, longtime libertarian, very offended by some of what was going on in New Hampshire, sincerely believed that the Libertarian National Committee was about to disaffiliate New Hampshire, and tried to do something to keep the party together because I believe she believed, not only from conversations with her, but with others, that if New Hampshire was disaffiliated by the Libertarian National Committee because of those awful tweets, that other states would then proactively disaffiliate, and the party would split into two parties. And the convention in Reno would look like a mess. Maybe we'd have 30 states that the LNC recognized or some such thing. And so then, Joe Bishop Henchman did whatever Joe Bishop Henchman did, which I don't really know what that was, because he deleted all of the emails before he resigned. And emails that didn't belong to him, emails that were sent to chair@lp.org. Those belong to the organization. They should have been passed on to the new chair.
Yeah.
And
Not
nobody
necessarily a good look.
No, I've called it criminal, and he's an attorney who could sue me. So that's a little far out there. Joe Bishop Henchman at lp.org. Yeah, he could probably do whatever he wants with those emails, but not chair@lp.org. And then Ken Molman, as acting chair for a month, didn't look to notice anything had been deleted, while lying to the investigative committee that staff were vetting those emails for sensitive personnel issues and attorney-client privilege. Well, attorney-client privilege is ridiculous. If Joe was doing his law office work at chair@lp.org, he's the one that violated that. There's no reason we should protect those. But sensitive personnel issues, okay. And then Whitney becomes chair. She's got a dumpster fire. So it takes her a couple of weeks. So we were 6 weeks in, and I was a raving loon being held back by Ed Tixon and Rufus Craig. I wanted to write the committee and said, your resolution that we shall be granted access is not being followed. You have staff in defiance of this. You have other members of the LNC in defiance of your resolution. That's grounds for being expelled from the party, right? Defying the will of the LNC. Karen Ann was one of them, because Joe Buchman's on the committee, and oh my God. What Joe Bishop Henchman did was something we'll never know, because the written record was destroyed and other people wouldn't talk to us. And I think he was doing what he thought was best to keep the bigots out, the people who might hate him for being gay. I don't know what he was doing, but I have no respect for you. Just resign, take your football and go home, and you close down the whole caucus and you get everybody to just condemn the party and quit. I don't think Mises has done anything quite that horrible yet. I'm concerned that they might. I'm concerned that I might get to a point where I say, no, I can't. I want all my friends to know I'm no longer a supporter of the National Party because some horrible thing happened. But that hadn't happened yet. And Josh can say some crazy stuff on the side. I guess Karen Ann can do whatever insanity she wants to do on her YouTube videos. Why anybody supports that is a little bit of a mystery to me. But free speech. Everybody's personal lives doesn't reflect on the party as a whole. Be interesting to see. Who do you think is going to get hired as the new executive director?
I don't even know yet.
Is it going to be Michael Heiss? Is Michael Heiss going to take Tyler Harris's position?
That would be interesting.
That would shake things up. You think David Smith will be the presidential nominee in 2024? He'll beat out Justin Amash? Maybe a third person will show up? I don't know.
Before we started this interview, I did interview Mike Termont, and he's planning on running on the Libertarian ticket. And so as far as Justin Amash,
I think I got a postcard from that guy, right?
Yeah,
that probably. He's running for the presidential nomination. He came out before Reno. Never heard of him.
Yeah, I had interviewed him just earlier today, and I'm impressed. I don't understand the Justin Amash love. Not that he should be hated. However, he hasn't always been libertarian, and personally, just because he held or is the highest ranking libertarian in the party currently, that doesn't mean he's the best person to be at the front of the party right now. That's one thing I want to stop seeing, regardless of who's in charge, is we just put recognizable names up front just because it's a recognizable name instead of the most qualified or principled or whatever libertarian up front who would actually do a good job.
Yeah.
The one thing I am sure of, as far as any of the Mises caucus or anything, is Angela's ability to get everything in order. I can't make a prediction as far as how well everything else is going to go, but that's one thing I'll put my reputation on.
Because of her effectiveness as chair of the Libertarian Party of Los Angeles?
Not just that. It's I've seen her work. I've seen her ability to take control and lead, and she has. And I will also be critical of this if it didn't happen. But she's said one, but no more than 2 terms. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
I
she or Mises endorsed Karen Ann, which doesn't play well for me.
yeah,
On the other
that
hand,
was a struggle behind the scenes. I'll tell you that.
well, someday I'd love to read all the emails around that. If I get appointed to another committee and nobody deletes them all, I might have a more favorable view of Mises having looked inside of that. But there was nobody more competent or experienced who showed up in Reno. I mean, John's probably very good. I think Tim Hagen did great minutes as combination secretary and treasurer. Tim didn't get any reward for that at all. He didn't even get to give the treasurer's report because of the change in agenda. I didn't get to give the audit committee report because the agenda got changed. But I don't care. It's just stupid. So yeah, I mean, I will be vigilantly curious to see how the board unifies and relates. And is it true? I mean, this is just in the world of rumor for me right now, but I had heard that Angela's pregnant and due to deliver around Christmas.
That's news to me.
All right, maybe it's just edit that out if you want. Maybe it's just total hearsay. But I do have concerns about what happens if Joshua becomes chair. That probably is a direction I would be concerned about. But sometimes when you get the captain's seat, you have kind of a change in the way you view the world. So
I am always optimistic as far as any of it goes, and I'm not going to condemn somebody first thing until something happens. However, once a pattern emerges, I'm not going to deny that pattern.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big concern. Even with Jeremy Kauffman, do I like everything he's done? No. I also do believe that people are or have the ability for redemption. And if that's who he is as a person, as some of his critics say, then once that evidence comes out, I'll agree. Up until now, I haven't seen it. However, he has crossed boundaries, and that's not okay.
Yeah,
So
Nick Gillespie asked him about some tweet around if 1,000 trans people were killed every day, but we had 0 taxes, we'd be better off. So I listened to his explanation of that, which was convoluted and non-persuasive. But I got to tell you
what he's saying, but it wasn't a good tweet, and you can make a point like that without saying that.
Yeah, it's like handing a loaded gun to your opponent. Why do that? It was like Karen Ann saying people opposed to her should go fuck themselves with a barbed dildo. All right, let's give the tweets from the National Party secretary to the candidates running against Marshall Burt in Wyoming and see how Wyoming voters respond to, let's put the guy in who's National Party secretary saying this crazy stuff, or let's just vote Republican. I mean, that does damage to our candidates, right? Yeah. At least it sure seems like it does to me. Then there's the other side of the argument, which is our candidates are getting 1% of the vote. Let's stop doing what we've always been doing. Well, I'm sorry, in Wyoming, you actually got a guy elected to the state house. He got more than 1%. Let's not do things that hand a loaded gun to his opponents. Please don't do that. If you can help spread that argument around Mises, that would be a good thing. Also, you talk about whether I want to be a libertarian or not. I think we have reached a milestone, a tipping point in the party where the future history will be fundamentally different than our past history, in that if you identify as a Republican or a Democrat, you're not identifying as a supporter of the Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee. There's a lot more to those parties than their national committees, which exist for the single purpose of organizing a convention. That's all the committee does. And I think the Libertarian Party is about to move to having a Libertarian National Committee that has some competition from other nonprofits or state organizations or regional organizations like the Frontier Project. So I think you don't need to resign from all things libertarian. You can find that other libertarian group that maybe you're more aligned with. And maybe the LNC will start to see itself as less of a recruit candidates, have committees that evaluate messaging and advertising and in charge of the whole show, to a committee that exists to not get in trouble with the Federal Election Commission and run a convention. That's probably enough for a volunteer board. So again, I come back to vigilantly curious. I'd say part of me is kind of excited to see what might happen with Ron Paul Revolution #2. A larger part of me, though, is fearful that it could go down a bigoted, racist, anti-gay, anti-social liberties sort of economic conservatism that may draw in more people and more money. I don't know. We've been at this 2 hours, and I'm happy to go for 2 more. I'm just getting. It's still daylight out. I love these kind of interviews.
Honestly, I was really excited about this, and this is why I really enjoy talking to you, because I am the new guard, the Mises. You're a lot of the old guard. However, this is, in my opinion, a little bit of bridging that gap that we can both learn from each other. And I think this is more important for the future of the party than anything else, because I can understand the definite concerns of even anti-Mises people. I think those people are irrational and repugnant, but anyone who is cautious or curious or skeptical, I get it. So am I. It is just what it is, and I think we do need to really just bridge these gaps if we're ever going to be or do anything.
Yeah, in part it's bridging gaps, and it's part educating each other about values, and then it's also getting feedback about what freaking works. We're a political party. Yeah. We're not a purist libertarian thought party. We're not a debate club or a gathering of crazy people every 2 years who pretend to run candidates. We're now a political party that's run 2 ex-governors for president, two sitting members of the United States House, and Ron Paul and Bob Barr. And we haven't even talked about the Barr campaign. Has Mises done anything as offensive as the Barr campaign? No, I don't think so. I'll tell you this, and I'm going to share it openly now for the first time. I voted for Bob Barr in Denver in 2008. I was excited. I was a Steve Cubby, Kubby, loyalist. I really liked Steve. He had been in jail fighting for cannabis legalization. He had adrenal cancer, and it was the only effective medication. And he won over the hearts of various sheriffs and was at the front lines. And when Cubby lost in one of the rounds of voting, I switched to Bob Barr. The other alternative was Mary Ruart, and I thought she had lost the debate. I really do go and I listen. But having voted for Bob Barr in Denver, and this is by way of confession, I could not bring myself to vote for him that November. It was such a horrible campaign. Horrible. And I felt the same way about Bill Weld saying, if you live in a state where voting libertarian might cause Trump to win your state, vote for Hillary. No, you don't get to do that. Just no. And So I guess I have some boundaries around that kind of stuff. I can't imagine 2024 with Dave Smith as the presidential nominee. How different is that than Vernon Supreme with the boot on his head? I guess I'll learn. I guess I'll see. But what I said to Nick Gillespie when he asked me about that was, I don't know. Zelensky was a comedian, right? I'm a huge fan of this guy. He's mastering Thomas Jefferson and Winston Churchill and George Patton and Genghis Khan, maybe all in one. What a brilliant media performance that leader of Ukraine is putting on in terms of fighting for self-determinism and liberties in Ukraine. And I know Ukraine was a corrupt government, but who would have thought a comedian would have stood up to Putin like this?
Yeah.
I don't know that Dave Smith is any Zelensky, but maybe we'll all get a chance to find out.
I mean, you never know. And I'll tell you why I would support a Dave Smith presidency or a Dave Smith candidacy run.
Yeah.
Is my idea is that there's no way in hell we're ever going to get the presidency. It's way too corrupt. I believe that at this point, it's a marketing campaign for us to run a presidential candidate. And at that point, we need the most effective messengers. Now, personally, I would like to see a Dave Smith and Spike Cohen ticket, only because they message both at the same high level, but in completely opposite ways. There was recently a podcast, BPH or something, and it had Larry Sharp, Spike Cohen, Dave Smith, and who am I can't remember, but the party's best messengers on a massive platform. And I think in any recent memory, that's done more for libertarianism than pretty much anything else.
Yeah, it's not entirely a marketing effort to run presidential candidate or ticket. It's also a cheaper path to ballot access in a lot of states.
Yeah.
So we got to do it because it's cheaper to get the votes for president, qualify for ballot access, than it is to go do a signature gathering campaign. My friend Bill is out now working 12, 16-hour days gathering signatures in Illinois with a tremendous hurdle there to get not just himself as a Senate candidate running as a libertarian, but every libertarian running as a libertarian in Illinois on that ballot. And that's a hard row to hoe. Row to hoe, not road, whatever. So I think we should be strategic about that and look at the presidential campaign as where it's cost effective in getting us ballot access. And you're right, we're not going to win the presidency. And even if we did, it wouldn't make any difference. We're going to suddenly get libertarian legislation out of a Republican Democrat controlled Congress, or suddenly the Supreme Court's going to start acting more libertarian. No. I had lunch with D. Frank Robinson, who was at the 72 convention and hadn't come back. He'd been to a couple in the 70s, and then he didn't come back until 2016. He was horrified by Bill Weld as well. And Frank was adamant, we got to stop running people for president, putting all our resources there. We need to focus on a couple of U.S. House races and get a libertarian elected to the House. And yeah, Justin Amash changed his affiliation from Republican to Libertarian, but he didn't get elected as a Libertarian.
Exactly.
I thought his speech in Reno was wonderful, and I thought the behavior of Karen Ann and her team of counters behind him was outrageous. I don't know if you watched the video, but there's like the Three Stooges running around behind him. Gail Lightfoot, I think, out of California, got to a mic and apologized to Justin and said it was an embarrassing display. I agree, and I thought it was intentional, but maybe that's too far. But can you imagine if Dave Smith had been at that podium, or Ron Paul had been at that podium, or Tom Woods had been at the podium, that those people wouldn't have stopped what they were doing and paid attention? The way they treated Justin Amash was, to me, very offensive.
I agree with that.
But I'm not unsympathetic to the argument that he's not the highest office holder. He's not. I think Marshall Byrd is, or Andre Maru from Alaska. These are people who got elected running under the libertarian label and served in a state house.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that Justin Amash gave me the ability to go to house.gov and look at the seating chart and see a sea of blue and a sea of red and one little gold dot. Good for him.
Yeah.
But I don't know that the next step for him should be running for president as the Libertarian nominee. Maybe he needs to run for the U.S. House again in Michigan, or the U.S. Senate again, or even the State House as a big L Libertarian.
I completely agree.
So then, who's better than Dave Smith? I still think I will go to that convention and listen to the two of them debate. And I'll be open about where my vote's going to go. I would imagine, based on what I know now and my past behavior, that's almost certainly how I'm going to behave in 2024, if I'm even a delegate. But who else is out there? Is Mark Cuban going to show up, say, hey, I'm now a libertarian and I'm going to put $1 billion into my campaign if you give me your nomination? I think even Mises would roll over for that, right?
There would be some people that would say hell no, period. I think a lot would.
Yeah.
It's hard to speak for them. Obviously not one libertarian speaks for all libertarians, but I think a lot of people would be sympathetic to that.
I would not, because Mark Cuban and I were classmates at Indiana University in 1979.
Oh, hot take.
I still have trauma over that ACORE case study case that I wrote and he took credit for. But that's my Mark Cuban comment. Mark, if you're out there, call me. I'd love to talk to you about that. He owned a bar. He was gone. He didn't write at any rate. And
story for another time.
I let it go. I didn't go in and talk to the professor or anything. I didn't care. I was reading Atlas Shrugged that year or that semester. So I was more into Ayn Rand. And that was another thing, going back to how did you become a libertarian? It was partly the flag. And then also my friend said, well, if you like the moon is a harsh mistress, you should read Atlas Shrugged. And I took about a month off from most of my classes and studies just to dig my way through everything Ayn Rand had ever written. And I guess I feel the same way about objectivists and Rand as I do libertarians. Rand was nuts. The whole affair with Nathaniel Brandon and asking permission of her husband and doing it in the apartment that Frank O'Connor lived in. Who does that? How cold and unempathetic and self-focused do you have to be? And then I can barely stand to read Atlas Shrugged anymore because of the glorification of the cigarette. I want a version of Atlas Shrugged with no tobacco, no cigars, no cigarettes. Maybe you could change it to where they're smoking pot. I might be okay with that. But Rand, died of lung cancer. She had one lung removed and then struggled to live a little while longer and died a horrible death. Well, glorifying like a spark in a man's mind, there's the point of light at the end of a cigarette, one reflecting no, this is nuts. So, when you look at any organization or individual, it's easy to be critical. But when you cross into name calling and condemning supporters and holding people in their history like they could never have a moment of enlightenment and change, that's not libertarianism as I know it.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice if Dave also ran for some other office at a state level in 2 years before. Well, 2 years it'll be our presidential nominee. So he's not going to be able to do that. I don't know. But I tell you what, I enjoy our conversations, and I'm happy to go. Yeah. We're now at 2 hours and 9 minutes. I don't know if any listeners are left, but I'm just feeling I'm feeling healthier and happier and more alert than I was when we first started. I miss lecturing in college. I miss people taking notes on what I have to say. And I feel heard by you, and I feel respected by you. And by and large, that's been my experience of everybody I've met who is a Mises loyalist.
Yeah. But I wouldn't go as far as saying I'm a loyalist because, if wrong happens, they're gonna fucking hear it.
Yeah.
Period.
I'll go off on another tangent for a minute since you're not saying we need to end this yet.
We can go as long as you would like.
Well, probably not more than another hour at most, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. But before I was volunteering so much time to the Libertarian Party, I did a lot of volunteering to the Boy Scouts of America. A lot of national conferences, a lot of training, a lot of literature development, a lot of time, a lot of money. And I became very opposed to the organization when they conflated being gay with being a pedophile. And they banned gay people because all gay people want to have sex with young scouts. And that's wrong. And then over the course of time, since I refused to accept their National Distinguished Service Award, so I was selected as one of a few dozen people every other year. They give out a national. So I refused to go get it because I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to belong to an organization. I want scouting to be as inclusive as my high school theater. No, you don't get to bash people or tell an Eagle Scout that who comes out and says I'm gay that you're no longer welcome in scouting. It's stupid. And other people were leaving. Steven Spielberg, could have been teaching movie making merit badge or whatever. Hey. So I left, and then they uncover through these class action lawsuits the fact that for 3 generations, the executives at the national headquarters of the Boy Scouts were covering up serial child molesters, thousands of them. And the attorneys find 82,000 victims, and they're proposing a $3.2 billion settlement in bankruptcy to try to get some compensation out to the ones who are still alive. Now, I have friends in scouting who are like, oh, they made it all up. It's false reports. Well, I don't think so. There's probably some of that, but I don't think that's the bulk. But look at all the people who grew old and died who were abused in the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s. They never got to see this ugliness come up. And out of that, I started looking at the scout law differently. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. It's a hypnotic suggestion for disarming a young man. You need to trust me. You've got to be loyal to me. You need to be obedient now. And so there's this, and now the similarity I'm going to draw to the Libertarian Party is you don't need to be loyal to people. The loyalty is to the principles. And you don't need to trust people who are asking you to do things that violate those principles. That's not a breaking of a trust. That's being a whistleblower. So I'm still listened to by some people in scouting, a handful still, because I sort of have proved to have a certain level of prophecy ability in terms of what was going to happen to scouting, and it's certainly suffering. COVID, membership is tanking, finances are a mess, the pension program is underfunded, and there's this huge lawsuit thing going on. And I said, we need to change the scout law. I think you need to get rid of a scout as obedient and replace it with a scout as a whistleblower. He seeks the help of others when confronted with immoral or illegal activity. Well, let's bring that to the Libertarian Party as well. Let's not be loyal to caucus or loyal to an individual candidate. Let's be loyal to those self-evident principles that arrive from the philosophy of natural law that can then be expressed in that part of philosophy that deals with politics. And let's be loyal to that. And I think natural law also expresses itself in terms of morality and ethics and maybe even epistemology and eschatology and the whole ball of wax. But I find when I talk about being a libertarian and the principles of non-initiation of aggression and right of self-ownership, productivity, property, it gives me a real sense of inner peace, like more of a religion almost than a political party. And I hesitate to say that, but that's, you ask me who I am or why I'm about that. I've become very interested because of my experience in scouting with don't be loyal to people, be loyal to principle. Don't trust others. Trust your discernment of the principles. Don't be obedient. Be a whistleblower. And we talked earlier, and now it's 2.5 hours in or whatever it is.
We'll wrap up soon.
The other thing that I give a lot of time, or have in the past given time and energy to, is researching hard evidence that we're not alone in the cosmos. And I think most of the UFO field is fraudsters.
Yes, I was waiting to get to this.
Finally got there. Most of the UFO field is fraudsters and grifters and mentally ill people. But, you know, I had several conversations with the 6th man to walk on the moon, Apollo 14 astronaut, Ed Mitchell, Apollo 14 with Alan Shepard. 6th man to walk on the moon, PhD from MIT, you can find YouTube videos of Ed Mitchell. He's now passed away, saying, I've been privileged enough to have been briefed on the fact that our government has recovered non-human created technology and attempted to reverse engineer it. Wow. One of the 12 guys to walk on the moon says this. That catches my attention. Now there's the videos out of the Nimitz and the Tic Tacs doing whatever they're doing. Now you've had congressional hearings on the UFO issue, just 90 minutes, but it's kind of a breaking of that ice. You got Marco Rubio saying that he's received some classified briefings that caused his interest in the whole UFO, UAP, extraterrestrial thing to take off. And so if there's something I want to leave your listeners with, the one or two of them that are still hanging in here, if there is life across the cosmos and it's developed high technology, and it's traveling around and observing or minimally interacting with humanity, in my view, by definition, they have to be libertarian. You don't get access to the technology that can cause you to be able to travel the cosmos and do that unless you have the non-initiation of aggression principle as a core value, because we tend to use our high technology to blow each other up. Even today, I never thought I would live in my lifetime again to feel that I'm threatened by some asshole somewhere setting off a nuke. What good is it going to do to set off a nuke, or 2 or 5, or how many ever Russia feels it should be able to set off to get parity with the United States, which killed a bunch of innocent people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in my view. Not necessary for that war. And again, I know it's a thing that can be argued about, but look at the bigger point. If the aliens are traveling the cosmos, they're not burning petroleum to get here. They're using some other sort of energy source that defies our current understanding of physics. And yet our best pilots and our military officers on ships with radar and forward-looking infrared radar, FLIR, as well as traditional radar and others, they're seeing things with no aerodynamic structure, no heat signature, no exhaust, outperforming our best military pilots by orders of magnitude. They dive underwater, they take off and fly through the air, and they probably go to outer space. And this is what we're now having our best trained pilots and military officials testify to. Bob Salas in Missileer, Minot, North Dakota. Maybe not Minot, but anyway, one of our missileers, Bob Salas, in the 60s. So his whole flight of missiles shut down while the people above ground, he was down in one of the egg-shaped things underground, the control center for these missiles that our government has seen fit to fund. Oh my gosh. But anyway, I don't want to go down that tangent. Stick on the main point. People above saying, hey, there's a flying saucer here. It's shining a red light down. And all the missiles going. I wrote a book called UFOs and Nukes. And I think some wiser than us, libertarian, non-initiating violence life that might be out there, that has also seen the self-evident truth of natural law and the right of self-ownership, all of that, is probably curious enough to monitor what the monkeys are doing now that they found the matches in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I wish we'd freaking grow up. I went to Washington, D.C. for something called the X Conference. And there I met the Minister of Defense for Canada, Paul Hellyer. Talked about evidence the Canadians had. I met Dr. Mitchell again. By the way, Dr. Mitchell, this is so perfect. 6th man to walk on the moon, grew up in Roswell, New Mexico.
Wow.
Go read up on that one.
Interesting.
So I met, people of high rank and station. This is not Bubba with a beer and a boat who claims some Palladian council has channeled some message for humanity. I just can't.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Maybe it's true, but no, what I'm interested in is military pilots with coincident radar returns and FLIR video and craft that's outperforming. Fascinated by that. And I think it's not unreasonable for all of us who are libertarians to conclude that if there's intelligent life in the universe, it's had a lot of time to evolve, it's got to see the truth of natural law as applied to relationships. And in my view, that's kind of the way they're behaving with us. I also have had two friends. One was the chief briefing officer for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's now passed away. But he told me he can't talk about this subject. As much as he would like to have talked about it, he'd go to a place worse than Leavenworth. Well, why is that? There's nothing to it. And he said, nobody's going to come save us. We've got to evolve out of this constant death and destruction and starvation and somehow unify. And once we are able to travel to the next star over, then that life that's out there will more openly contact us. I think that's true. I also talked to a friend of mine who was the chief of medical operations in Houston for NASA. He said the exact same thing. As much as I might like to talk about this, I could go to a place worse than Leavenworth. And I said, well, have you seen the videos from the Nimitz of these, no aerodynamic structures, no exhaust, things that are outperforming? They call them Tic Tacs, but they're like 60-foot long hot water heaters. He said, you mean the stuff that dives under the water and takes off and does circles around our aircraft and zips away? I said, yeah, you've seen the video. He says, no, I haven't seen the video. I said, well, how do you know about it? He said, before he joined NASA, he was in the Air Force, a pilot. It's because I've seen it with my own eyes. Like, what?
Wow.
So we're not alone in the universe. And he said, Joe, you need to stop worrying about whether we're alone in the universe or not and get right with Jesus. He's a Christian.
Interesting.
We need to stop killing each other on this planet. And we need to get universal food and housing and clothing and education. We need the abundant economy that can do that through nonviolent charitable giving. And then maybe we could think about where we belong in the cosmos. Because who would want us for a neighbor right now? What do you imagine if there is life in the cosmos and it's peaceful libertarian life? What does visiting planet Earth look like right now? It probably looks a lot like visiting the Donbass region for a vacation.
A bunch of savages.
We're pissing in our own nest and we're fighting with each other over who's the more pure libertarian. Makes me kind of sad, makes me feel a little hopeless, but I did not think I would ever see congressional hearings and military officers taking the UFO subject seriously in my lifetime.
You know what I think is honestly interesting? I was just talking about this, is that these things are happening and so many people don't care. They just aren't even reacting to it. It's like, do you guys see what's going on right now? And nope, they would rather take some Facebook poll on how, like what kind of potato they are.
There's a great South Park episode where the aliens show up, but the kids are all too busy playing their video game to notice. Do you remember that episode?
Yep.
That's spot on.
Yep.
So I don't know. And then, is this all there is? Your heart stops beating, your brain stops firing neurons, and everything goes black, and that's it.
Mathematically, I don't think it's possible mathematically.
My father-in-law tonight is dying. He may not last through the night. I don't know, but he's on hospice.
Sorry to hear that.
It's okay. He's 100 and a half. He's lived a pretty good life up to the last few days, weeks maybe. But a brilliant guy. He was literally a rocket scientist for Hercules, chemical engineer. Brilliant guy. But my mother was a surgical nurse. My dad was a physician. Hospice is now caring for my father-in-law. All of these people who've been present for people dying uh, or having a near-death experience and recovering are pretty. If you get into that career in that community, they're all very confident that there's something more going on here. And I'd like to believe that whatever that greater thing is that's going on is pleased by people who choose to remain loyal to libertarian principles of non-initiation of violence and letting others have the right of ownership of their own body, zero slavery in any hint of it. I think that's important beyond just our political battles during our lifetime. I think it's important to our character development, our spirituality. I think it's important to the evolution of the planet to get to a point where we might be invited into some broader community of high-tech, peaceful life that's out there. And really, when you think about it, even on Earth, the only people that really have access to super high tech and are pretty peaceful at heart are libertarians right here, right now. So I think you either get that in the cosmos or it would have all blown up by now.
Libertarianism is the way of the future.
Yeah,
and it's the natural order of things, and we need to restore it. It was stolen from us, and we need to take it back.
Yeah, I mean, in the broader history of things, it's a rare flicker of liberty. We're not as bad off as we were under the priests and kings and conquest-driven people like Genghis Khan. I've been to Mongolia a few times. We could do another hour on that, but yeah, in terms of real human liberty, the founders of this nation, and in some way the civil rights movement of my lifetime, has created more liberty for more people, and it's at constant risk of going dark again.
Yeah.
I don't think Mises is the main driving force for it going dark again.
Yeah. That is the hope, and anyone who's fighting against that, I think that says more about them than anything else. Because, like I said, I'm hopeful. I could be wrong, but if I'm not, and it is the next big step up, then you're going to be really kicking yourself for not being a part of it and trying to fight back against it. So I remember every single person who called me a Nazi. Just saying that.
Well, at least you're not an elder abusing psychopath.
Fair enough.
And
on that, I think we're going to wrap up. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I want to get you back on. This was honestly just so much fun, and honestly, I'm really excited to continue working with you and everyone else in the Utah Libertarian Party, because we've got lightning in a bottle here.
I feel the same way. Barry's done a really good job of healing and keeping people focused on the prize. And I want to thank you for letting me do my little UFO riff here at the end. I'd actually forgotten about it for most of the talk. I really do believe that. I really do believe it's important to be loyal to libertarian principles, both in terms of the evolution of the planet and uniting with life in the cosmos, but also in terms of, at least for me, my personal spirituality and connecting to whatever loving creator is kind of watching what we're doing and hoping for the best. If everybody could see the wisdom of non-initiation of aggression and self-ownership and the economy that could grow from that to get us to really a place where everybody gets free healthcare and food and housing, and every deserving person through private charity, that would be a world that I would like to pass on to my two granddaughters. And the world I'm afraid they're going to inherit looks a lot different. So whatever we can do to make life better for Emma B and Madeline, I'm up for.
Yeah.
And hopefully this show moved it forward a millimeter.
I'm trying to get that Overton window back and add to the conversation. So,
So what's the record for your podcast for longest broadcast?
I think this is it, because I think 2 hours 10 minutes I think was the last one. So
we're at 2 hours and 30 and another 9 seconds. So what I would love to do is maybe come back on and have a debate with other people, or if you want to do a one-on-one, this was fun for me too.
Yeah, like I said, it will definitely get you back on. I'm doing more Utah stuff. And like I said, we've got lightning in a bottle here and we need to showcase it. Point in case this entire interview and show. So on that note, thank you to everyone who has actually made it to this point in the interview. I hope it was as entertaining for you as it was for me. You can always check us out at risetoliberty.com/links. That will bring up the Liberty link tree and give you links to everywhere we are on the internet. We have just paired with and the Two-Party System Network here on YouTube. And we've also paired with Regional Prime Television, which is exclusively on a Roku device. So if you have a Roku, go add Regional Prime Television for all your libertarian and outside of the mainstream news and entertainment, just right at your fingertips. And until next time, I hope you guys stay free.
Live long and prosper.